it's so tragic that it took the SEC in America, which is the market regulator for the American markets, to point out that there were certain acts by the Gautam Adani group which was tantamount to some serious violations. And Mr. Adani's group, and principally him and Sagar Adani, have been indicted by the US courts in the East District of New York. That tells you how absolutely fragile, uh, extremely compromised is the way our institutions are being run today. So I think we are living in times of compromised institutions like SEBI and an extremely opaque government for sure. When you look at the acquisitions against Madhabi Buch, now a former SEBI chief, I'm astonished and absolutely disgusted with the fact that the government, the India's finance ministry, or India's PMO, why wasn't SEBI awake to the fact that the prices of the Adani groups were skyrocketing high? You go into depth, Neelu, and you'll find that in many industries where you take an Adani company and compare it to a comparable entity in the same industry, the PE valuations were ridiculously high for the Adani group companies, which means that there was some kind of a frenzied buying going on, which looked prima facie as totally irrational. All the investors in the market, 4 crore investors, or the 10% of Indian people who are involved in the securities market. How is it that everyone, the opposition, the media, everyone went quiet when Adani surfaced? How is it that everyone is okay with Rafael? How is that everyone was so kind of comfortable with the electoral bond scam? How is that no one bothered to, in fact, even bat an eyelid over the huge demonetization, black money that nobody saw the light of, and which crippled the Indian economy? Why was it done? Who's responsible? No questions asked. So I believe there is something about our country that frankly intrigues me.
Hello and a warm welcome to HW News Network, your one stop show, truth be told, for some engaging and thought provoking conversations. Bombay High Court today stayed for 4 weeks a lower court order to file a police case against former SEBI chief Madhabi Buch and 5 others in connection with an alleged market fraud and regulatory violations. Now, this was a single bench of Justice Shiv Kumar Dige, which said that the special court order of March 1st had been passed mechanically without going into details or attributing specific roles to the accused. Hence, the order is stayed till next date. Now, 4 weeks' time is given to the complainant, who is Sapan Srivastav, a journalist, to file his affidavit in reply to the petitions. And the judgment was on the pleas by Ms. Buch and 3 full-time directors of SEBI, or the Securities Exchange Board of India, Ashwini Bhatia, Anant Narayan, and Kamlesh Chandra Vashne. So Madhabi Buch has got relief for 4 weeks, and in 4 weeks' time, Sapan Srivastav, the complainant, has to file his affidavit. But what does the court order or the interim relief which Madhabi Buch has been given shows really that is there not a way by which you can investigate into the alleged irregularities which any SEBI chief has indulged? How do you restore the confidence of the investors? The court doesn't seem to be standing by the side of the investors, but it seems to be standing by the side of the SEBI chief. So, what does it really go to show? Joining us this evening is former Congress spokesperson, author, political commentator Sanjay Jha, who himself is a banker, has been a banker, and follows economy very, very closely. Thank you so much, Sanjay, for joining on HW this evening. And it's always wonderful to have you on the program. And
Thank
today's
you.
Sanjay, today's Bombay High Court order. What do you really? I mean, do you really think that Madhabi Buch cannot be investigated? And is that the message which the Bombay High Court today has said, that who's going to judge the regulator? That is the biggest question. If the courts also seem to be standing by the side of the SEBI chief who has indulged in wrongdoings, and of course, she was not directly implicated in this particular case because this was an old matter of 1994 under which the complaint was made. But even then, the systemic failures, the manner in which the SEBI is run. So, does it mean that if the court doesn't seem to be standing up for the restoration of the confidence of the investors, what does it? What do you think the larger picture really indicates then?
Nilu, in my opinion, this is a larger comment on the way Indian judicial system is functioning today. You had a special court that said that an FIR can be lodged and proceedings can start. I mean, that basically meaning that investigations can commence at that point. And now you have a complaint actually against that by the petitioners, saying that they had not received the notice. And obviously they have every right to defend themselves. And you're right, it's an old case, but at the end of the day, it also shows the fragility of the system. I do agree that if somebody is going to lodge a complaint against person X, that other person on whom the complaint is made has the right, the fundamental right to know what exactly is the issue before it takes on its own investigative dimensions. But it really is a commentary on the how India's judicial system is working. And I think we should all, as citizens of this country, should be deeply anxious that it improves very quickly, because I think we are all susceptible to its abuse. Having said that, one point is important, that as far as SEBI is concerned, and since you mentioned that, and I think in today's conversation, probably I'm sure you want to look at the larger functioning of India's stock market regulator and the Adani issue, where I think the former SEBI chief was right in the hot seat. I do feel that it's so tragic that it took the SEC in America, which is the market regulator for the American markets, to point out that there were certain acts by the Gautam Adani group which was tantamount to some serious violations. And Mr. Adani's group, and principally him and Sagar Adani, have been indicted by the U.S. Courts in the East District of New York. That tells you how absolutely fragile, uh, extremely compromised is the way our institutions are being run today. That an American entity sitting thousands of kilometers away is actually pointing out the various lacunae, uh, or the, shall we say, the frangible nature of India's governance, is a commentary on India's SEBI. And look at the fact, right, Neelu, that the SEC or the FBI in their investigations pointed out that certain bribes were paid by the Adani group in for their projects here, which basically violated the norms in the United States, which was misleading investors and the financial institutions. In India, the Modi government did not even investigate those complaints. So I think we are living in times of compromised institutions like SEBI and an extremely opaque government for sure.
Sanjay, if you look at the court hearing today, and I was amazed when the complainant, who's a journalist, Sapan Srivastava, he was told. I mean, in fact, Tushar Mehta, who's a Solicitor General and arguing for this case, said that Sapan Srivastava is a habitual litigant, and there has been an extortion case against him, and where he demanded some 5 lakhs to extort the public servants. If that is the kind of argument which is coming, which is very clear that they do not want anybody to question SEBI chief. Is that what the message Tushar Mehta was sending out to the entire country? And is that the message which the courts today have said, that, look, even if you come up with a litigation, you're not supposed to be questioning a SEBI chief or SEBI in general?
Well, Nilu, I think you and I are not going to cast aspersions unless we know the facts. Now, I'm going to go as any individual who has to have faith in the system, no matter how corroded it has become. Now, in this example, I don't know anything about this gentleman, Mr. Srivastava, at all. It's an old case. That too is a fact. I feel that what worries me is, put this case aside for the moment. I mean, she has a certain lawyer defending her. She is capable of hiring the best to do that. But the larger point here is this, or you maybe Mr. Mehta is defending SEBI or whatever it may be. The larger point is that, when you look at the acquisitions against Madhavi Buch, now a former SEBI chief, I'm astonished and absolutely disgusted with the fact that the government, the India's finance ministry or India's PMO, shielded her. I mean, they were the ones who selected her. And here you have an accusation of a lack of transparency, of actually a conflict of interest, of in the richest man in India for a long time. He's now number two to Mr. Mukesh Ambani, of the richest man whose stocks, by the way, whose group stocks were contributing in 2022, Neelu, the growth of India's market capitalization during the year, 80% was on account of Adani Group stocks. You don't have to be a genius in finance to know that's odd. That's peculiar. That's weird. It's like saying that India's stock market will grow next year by 100%, and 90% of that will only happen because of, say, Reliance Group or, say, only the Tatas. I mean, anybody will ask this question: why wasn't SEBI awake to the fact that the prices of the Adani groups were skyrocketing high? You go into depth, Nidu, and you'll find that in many industries where, you take an Adani company and compare it to a comparable entity in the same industry, the PE valuations were ridiculously high for the Adani group companies, which means that there was some kind of a frenzied buying going on, which looked prima facie as totally irrational. And I feel sorry about that. I feel sorry that Madhvi Puri Buch, who was not a bureaucrat, came like many people in from the private financial services industry, and frankly speaking, I don't know whether she did some good. Probably she must have. But the larger point is she refused to go and depose before the Public Accounts Committee. I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm just like flummoxed as to how all this happened so
Oh,
brazenly, and a
you were supposed
government was okay with that.
right, but Sanjay, she was supposed to be going to before the PAC. She's supposed to appear before the Lokpal, where I think she has given a written reply. Uh,
Hmm.
but the point is that this particular case of Sapan Srivastava, coming as it does, just 2 days after she demitted office, what does it really show? People are attributing a lot of political motives to this case, though I would personally or individually see it, in the larger context of cleansing the SEBI and what has really gone wrong. But the point is that there's always some kind of politics behind every case which comes up, and especially when
Hmm.
it's related to Madhvi Buch. And people have been saying that, these are ways in which probably the finance ministry and the PMO would try and control Madhvi Buch because they are scared, and even Adani for that matter, they would be scared that what if she spills beans, then all the secrets will come tumbling out of the cupboard. So do you also see some reason, like that, where the government is trying to tighten the leash around Madhvi Buch in some way or the other?
Well, it's interesting because I'm going to again assume that everyone is acting with a high degree of integrity and has also professionally done a due diligence on the documents submitted by the complainant, etc. If you go by the special courts, when it endorsed that the lodging of the FIR against Madhvi Puri Buch and some people from the SEBI will happen, the words are very clear there. In fact, they say prima facie there is enough evidence to say that there should be an investigation because there has been manipulation of stocks and etc etc. Now I think the issue here is, and there can be no dispute on this, that the government of Mr. Modi was definitely ensuring that Madhvi Puri Buch did not face any scrutiny whatsoever. Why do you think did the BJP behave like the PR and the legal counsel of Adani and Madhvi Puri Buch as well? It's shocking indeed, right? That you have even the Supreme Court appointed committee, which had people like Mr. Lenekani, etc. Even they said that the SEBI investigation into the Adani group is like a journey without a destination. These are their words, not mine. And that tells you of the level of cynicism or the contempt or skepticism about the way SEBI functions. And I just feel that, we are an incredible country, really. You have India's regulator of the stock markets, and India's stock market, by the way, now it's of course gone down by 90 lakh crore over the last 6 months. And our share in the global market cap is now down to less than 3%. We are at 2.9%. So India is clearly not the flavor of the season at all. But how can you have a regulator who is being accused of having a conflict of interest? We know what the issues are with the Agora advisory services in both India and Singapore. And then the bigger accusation against her was the fact that she did not recuse herself on the Adani investigations because, there was some investment in an offshore entity which was linked to Vinod Adani, which is Gautam Adani's brother, blah, blah, blah. The bottom line is that if you have even what I would call is a sliver or a sliver of accusation against you that needs to be above board, you recuse yourself. You take a step back. In the case of the Adani Group, Madhabi Buch refused to do that. That's pretty much on record. And you also have the government. I think we're letting the government, we should, they are incredible. I mean, here was Mr. Modi's government. The finance minister didn't say a word because obviously the prime minister was doing all the heavy lifting, or his entire PR team was doing the heavy lifting because the nexus was about Mr. Adani and him. It really is a shocker, in my opinion, that how in India, and I would like to make a political statement on your show. I was part of the Congress, frontline spokespeople along with Abhishek Manu Singhvi, Manish Tiwari, and Jayanti Natarajan and Renuka Chaudhary during those very crazy pre-2014 years. And at that point of time, I remember the BJP was asking questions on governance and corruption. And the people of India, the voters in our country said, yes, there is corruption. And actually, as we discovered, nothing was proven. It was all a notional loss. And Vinod Rai went on to hold some very wonderful positions in the government, including the BCCI. Okay, Congress got routed. But how is it that suddenly all the investors in the market, 4 crore investors, or the 10% of Indian people who are involved in the securities market, how is it that everyone, the opposition, the media, everyone went quiet when Adani surfaced? How is it that everyone is okay with Rafael? How is that everyone was so kind of comfortable with the electoral bond scam? How is that no one bothered to, in fact, even uh, bat an eyelid over the huge demonetization black money that nobody saw the light of and which crippled the Indian economy? Why was it done? Who's responsible? No questions asked. So I believe there is something about our country that frankly intrigues me. It's like this, right, Neelu? If somebody makes an acquisition charge against you, you will be hung from the tallest tree by the thinnest thread. Somebody makes an accusation against me, and I will be invited to actually Los Angeles to receive an Oscar. That's how the BJP Congress contrast has been. It's absolutely, it tells me somewhere that do many of our people look within and say, where is our moral fiber as a country? I think there should be a common yardstick. For example, on Madhavi Buch, she would probably be a couple of batches junior to me if I were to look at how we all look at it in the financial services industry. I'm just kind of surprised that as a SEBI chief, what a poor example she set, Neelu. You are expecting listed companies to have high level of corporate governance. You want due diligence. You want all the hundreds of disclosures. There are penalties made on board of directors and everyone for even the minor unintentional flaw. And here was a SEBI chief sitting in the hot seat, accused of being hand in glove with somebody who was up to no good. There was a Hindenburg report. There were other accusations. There was a Financial Times report. It's all there in the open. And the SEBI chief was like, I am going to hold this position. I'm not going to budge. And she's proved to be the worst example of corporate governance in this country. This
But
case is further
right.
proof of that.
Absolutely. And it also goes to show that the courts do not seem to be standing by the side of the investors, and that's something which really worries everyone. And here you are standing by by the side of Madhabi Buch. But according to you, do you think that there is a possibility Madhabi Buch could be jailed? There could be a criminal investigation against her, given the fact that there is a parallel inquiry into Adani in America. And so, do you see any possibility where Madhvi Buch could really be on the back foot because of this?
Well, this is a little bit of a slippery slope because I don't want to politicize this, but I do believe that the Adani issue and the role of SEBI has to be investigated in a forensic sense. And I'll tell you why I'm disappointed here by Mr. Modi's government, which obviously has their own vested interest to protect the blue-eyed boy. And I'll tell you the reason why it's an absolute shocker, Neelu. Because in no democracy in the world, no democracy, definitely not the mother of democracy, as Mr. Modi would like to call it, would any politician, would any market regulator, would the investors ever tolerate the kind of shenanigans or the pretty serious allegations that have been made? I think by now you would have found resignations from the highest levels in this country. It's serious stuff. I think what has happened in India, Nilu, and that's frankly a tragedy even for our investors who are today bleeding, by the way. It shocks me that in India we believe there is no insider trading. There's no insider trading. Have you seen anybody really being hauled up for insider trading? None at all. Has anybody looked into all these foreign portfolio investors coming into India? Where do they come from, especially when they come from tax havens? Never. I'll give you an example. SEBI took so long to get to the Supreme Court committee. Can I tell you something? In an age of electronic funds transfers, okay, and you have depository receipts, you know who is investing. It takes a little to find out who is the subterranean investor hiding behind certain opaque filters. It's not difficult to find out at all. Listen, it's a will of the government. Remember, this was the same Modi government that sent a private, some kind of a hired aircraft to get Mehul Choksi from some part in some country in the Caribbean. Came back with nothing and had, I think, the officers who went had a great holiday in the blue waters, of the Caribbean. But if the government has a will, it can do it, right? To understand the underlying fraud or the allegations of fraud would take the government not more than a month. There are trails. Each web connects to the other. You have to just bring somebody for an interrogation. But nobody will do it because then you're opening a Pandora's box and then, anybody's head can roll. So I really feel, for example, that even, a lot of people took him casually. But why would Subhas Chandra, don't forget that case. Subhas Chandra is supposed to be very close to the current dispensation in Delhi. I mean, his TV channel definitely bats for the BJP. Why would Subhas Chandra go public and say that there was something very sleazy and, you know, or shady in the way somebody approached him on fixing the deal on that Sony Z merger, which frankly never happened? I mean, somebody has to look into it. I'm not saying that just because somebody makes an acquisition that the other person is guilty or convicted or has to be kind of maligned. I am not. I don't believe in that at all. I don't believe in the cancel culture either. But all I'm going to say is that if you are not even going to investigate it, the message to the people of India is we have something to hide and we are going to do it stubbornly because we can influence big media. We control. There's a regulatory capture, and Mr. Modi's government will do as they please. And that's how they have done it so far.
True. Sanjay, do you think now that Madhabi Buch, if at all she was planning to go abroad or settle down abroad, she won't be able to do it now because of this particular FIR, which has been, I mean, the FIR has been stayed, but the matter still hangs on her head like the Damocles sword. And is that the politics which I was wanting to ask you, that they will support Madhabi Buch and also try to put the noose around her that look, you can't breathe easy. Is that does that look like a possibility now? The way Modi government will deal with Madhvi Buch, that because of this particular case, they'll keep the noose tightened, And at the
Hmm.
same time, Tushar Mehta will appear for her in the court, will support her as much as he wants and to whatever scale he wants.
Yeah.
But then the news will be there around her neck.
Well, Nilu, I do think that Mr. Modi's government uses all these cases for making a bigger statement. It's what you call as sending a message out, right? Well, see, what governments do is that they insinuate to a certain class of people, in this case, Indian business, that the government is an all powerful entity. Look at the Chanda Kochar case, for example. I hold no brief for her and her husband. But there were questions raised even there in terms of how, many, multiple wheels within wheels emerged. And I think there is going to be a lot of worry here for Indian business. I feel two things have happened. Indian businessmen, and I'm talking about the biggest industrialists downwards. Of course, exceptions are there, like Mr. Uh, Adani and maybe a couple of other very powerful people that we all know about. Maybe they are the exceptions, but a large section of India, 95%, I would say, are terrified of Narendra Modi's government. They're terrified of this ED, income tax, CBI trifecta. They are fully aware that there can be a massive harassment that can happen to them. You see, it takes nothing, right, for an honest businessman to be suddenly told that, hey, there's a notice against you and we're going to come and do a raid on you. Because for all businesses, reputation is their most critical asset. You destroy that, you humiliate somebody, and people just go down the tube. I think there is a lot of messaging going on here. It happened in the case of, I would say, many businesses in the past, uh, where the government says, "Listen, we call the shots, right? And why we can protect anybody we want, and if we want tomorrow, we can go after you." And I think Indian businessmen are responsible, or other business persons are responsible for the situation because they've chosen to be so pusillanimous. They've pretended to be such cheerleaders for this government. It's embarrassing. It's shameful. And you see what the government does is, the moment they find you compromised and going down on your knees and crawling, they will actually push you down even further. Which is why Indian industry, Indian business, at some point will have to look within and say, you've sold your soul, really. And truth be said, you might have bought peace, but you have made yourself so vulnerable to this government, they can do what they want to do with you. And I do feel that there's a lot of messaging going on here in all these cases. But here is the point. I think Madhavi Buch deserves to be heard. She has every right to kind of express her arguments. There are very serious accusations. I mean, anybody in this country who thinks Hindenburg report was just a short seller's fantasy, they need to read that report. Probably they haven't understood it. There are some facts put out there that have not been investigated till this date. The Supreme Court committee, unfortunately, was nothing but a paper tiger. It went nowhere. We all know that the Supreme Court, by the way, was extremely soft in its own administering of this entire investigation. So it was essentially shambolic, which brings you to the point that after all the drama, the bleeding of the Adani Group stocks, Adani is back to being the number two richest man in the world. From what I read, they're still getting huge contracts. Mr. Modi is back third time, maybe a weaker, but he's still a prime minister. And actually, in India, nothing's changed. And I think, to all those people who will watch your program, I think we're coming to the end of it. That's the message for all of us. Are we so weak? Are we so fragile? Have we become so compromised? Are we so, dhila? And, as you say, our chalta hai attitude is that it's okay. It's been normalized. You see, now we are living in a universe where if the Modi government says, I refuse to ask somebody to, kind of resign because of corruption charges, say a minister, everybody will say, अब मोदी जी कह रहे हैं तो ठीक ही होगा, छोड़ दो. This is a state that I think worries me about our country, because it's not just about SEBI or Madhvi
True.
Puri Buch. It's about Indian democracy itself.
Okay, one last quick question, and
Sure,
then we'll
sure,
wind up the interview
sure,
about Madhabi
sure,
Buch. That so,
sure.
which means that the way things are moving in our country, we don't see Madhabi Buch being penalized in any way.
I do feel, Neelu, that until Mr. Modi's government is there at the top, they'll be worried, right? Because there could be a lot of skeletons in the cupboard that we don't know about. And I can tell you for a fact, prima facie, having looked at the reports, having read them, my past experience as a banker, and I have a lot of friends in the entire industry. It is absolutely ridiculous for anyone to assume that just because Mr. Modi's government, harassed Rahul Gandhi and Mahua Moitra and went after anybody in the media who criticized Mr. Modi or the Adani issue, that the issue is sorted. It's not. And until it's investigated, it will one day be out in the open. You see, the beauty of life is that if you have cheated, you cannot in today's world really destroy the documents, because somebody will ask you to produce them. You'll have to produce them. You can't fake them. Where the monies have gone are out there in the open, and I think it will be exposed if Vinod Adani had a role to play. If there was stock price manipulation, nobody can dodge it for the life of anything in the world. I mean, if the stock, if for example, Adani Group was holding more than the prescribed equity in a certain publicly listed company, that will be known if it was doing it through some kind of a shady intermediary. And Madhabi Buch eventually, as I always feel, that whether in politics or finance or media, at some point it's your conscience that will speak to you. And I do believe that the Indian voter, the Indian investor, will know the truth behind it all. It never dies. It never dies. At some point, BJP will lose power one day, Nilu. The government will change. And I'm not saying be vindictive. I'm not saying be vindictive. Let the law take its course as we all use it in our political discourse. But if there are skeletons in the cupboard, if corruption has happened, if laws have been bent, if stock market price manipulation has happened, if investors have been taken for a ride, if bribes were paid to certain officials for the projects for which Mr. Adani's group is indicted, these things will be out in the open. You can't hide it.
Absolutely. So we'll have to wait and watch what happens in this particular case. Apan Srivastav has got 4 weeks to file his affidavit and give the replies. But will Madhabi Buch be investigated ever as long as the Modi government survives? We'll have to wait and watch. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure, Sanjay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stay ahead with our cutting edge news app. Instantly access the latest shorts in just 1 minute and breaking news in just 50 words. Download now for a smarter, faster news experience.